So you get what Klien is saying, that Bernanke says we could do more, we have more ammunition. And incidentally, isn't it kind of funny that the way Bernanke talks, it's always about how we have more ways to shoot the economy if we had to. Right? He always talks about the Fed hasn't run out of ammunition yet. You know, we can bomb the economy even more if we need to. All right. So Klien, this is back to Klien. So some argue there's nothing more the Fed can do, but Bernanke is not one of these people. Quote, I wouldn't accept the proposition that the Fed has no more ammunition, Bernanke said in June. Okay, so back to Ezra Klein. So why isn't the Fed using those tools? Explanations vary. He gives various psychological reasons, constraints that people are facing. Klien says, I don't pretend to know what is truly in the heart of our top central banker, but in conversations with Fed watchers and economists, I am convinced that there is something more the Fed can do and that now is the right time for them to do it. I call it Uncle Ben's crazy housing sale. Tomorrow morning, Bernanke could walk in front of a camera and announce that the Federal Reserve intends to begin buying huge numbers of mortgage-backed securities with the simple intention of bringing the interest rate on a 30-year mortgage down to about 2.5% and holding it there for 1 year and 1 year only. The message would be clear. If you have any intention of ever buying a house, the next 12 months is the time to do it. This is Uncle Ben's crazy housing sale, and you'd be crazy to miss it. So he's picked the right adjective, that's for sure. Okay, so it actually gets worse, but let me stop there. Let's assume he just ended his article at that point. So think about what he's doing. There's a term for this. Maybe you guys can help me. You know, I know Tom Woods was outsourcing this. I'm drawing a blank. So clearly what would happen is anybody, by his own admission, anyone who in the next 10 years has any intention of buying a house would do it next year. So if you think about the intertemporal allocations, what would that do? All this demand for housing that otherwise would have been spread out over a decade is going to get concentrated into 1 year, and then it's going to fall off a cliff. So what happens when the demand curve goes way up and then it whips back, price goes up, right? And then it goes down. So the price of housing would go like this. Is there what's the word for that? It's like when you're chewing gum and you go, and what is that? It's you blow a ball, a bubble, right? That's what it is. So what he's proposing quite literally is we could create a massive housing bubble, and that would fix things. And also, I'm going to sound like a jerk, but it's okay. The cat's out of the bag. That horse has left the barn. This is not an ad hominem attack. Roderick's here. I think he can confirm for me. It's going to sound like I'm attacking Ezra Klein personally, but I'm actually not. I do want to point out, though, that he's 28 years old. He has a BA in political science from UCLA, and he is telling us what the 30-year mortgage rate should be down to the first decimal point. How could he possibly know that? Why shouldn't it be 2.6%? What about 2.35%? Then it would be Uncle Ben's even crazier housing sale, right? So, and I'm being quite serious. Like, how could he possibly? What about what you guys know? Dave Ramsey. He's been telling people to get out of debt, and he has these compromises where he says, okay, if you want to buy a house, I want you to have a big down payment, and I want you to take no more than a 15-year mortgage. Ezra has left these people out. He's been focusing on the 30-year mortgage. What the heck is your problem, Ezra? He doesn't want to help unemployed workers. Really, he should also make sure that Ben buys 15-year mortgage-backed securities to push down that interest rate, too. You see what I'm saying? He's leaving these things out. Another thing just off the top of my head, there's lots of corporate pensions right now. That's a big issue that corporate pensions are underfunded. If you take 30-year interest rates and push them way down, that will increase the underfunding, right? Because now those future liabilities are going to have a higher present value, and the assets that you had are going to earn less as you're pushing down long-term rates. Now, Ezra doesn't mention all that. I am sure that he has an Excel spreadsheet where he has all these different things I just mentioned and has the pros and cons and has a social welfare function to balance the benefits to unemployed workers right now getting a job against corporate pensions being underfunded 16 years out. And he must have had the pros and cons, and he has it. And I'm sure it's linked somewhere probably that we can go look at that information, because he wouldn't just spout off, Bernanke should go do this without thinking about it carefully, right? He wouldn't just do that, I wouldn't think. People would be more responsible. Okay, what did I mean when I said it gets worse? Typically, Keynesians talk about what they call counter-cyclical policy, right? So you would think, okay, well, if the housing market's awful and they're saying come in and buy mortgage-backed securities and to boost the housing. Okay, fine. But listen to this, and this is, okay, let me just read it. This is a particularly good time for Uncle Ben to launch his sale because the housing market appears to be turning. More houses are being built, the price of existing homes is beginning to rise, and inventory levels are falling. A recent Wall Street Journal poll of economic forecasters found that 44% thought that housing had bottomed out, while only 3% thought the housing market had further to fall. The Fed, in other words, would be working with the economic trends rather than against them. Do you get what he's saying there? So what he's saying is we wouldn't want to make housing go up if we thought it was going to keep going down, but since now it's finally bottomed out after 3 or 4 agonizing years and it's starting to go up, now's the time to jump in and take all the future demand and concentrate it in 1 year. What could go wrong with that? I can't imagine, because the economy is basically just about total spending, right? So this is what I mean in terms of giving a caricature of Keynesian opinion. He is literally calling to create a housing bubble. He just isn't using that phrase. So when it's not at all a straw man when Austrians say things like Keynesians don't have an idea of the intertemporal structure of production and all they care about is boosting spending right now and creating jobs. That is not a caricature. That is, in practice, what their policy proposals do. And it's not enough to say, oh, come on, this is just some pundit. This isn't the actual PhD economist. Ezra Klein, in an interview with Paul Krugman within the last 3 or 4 months, we're talking, and he asked Krugman, should the Fed, he didn't say create a housing bubble right now, but he said words to that effect, and Krugman was like, yeah, if they could do it, it'd be fine. So, that is the proposal. And of course, you guys, probably many of you know that back in 2002, Krugman famously said, and the thunder booms as I say this, that that Greenspan needs to replace the NASDAQ bubble with a housing bubble. And also, just the last point, I'll turn to your questions here. Krugman has been living down that statement for years, and he has gone through a succession of explanations for it. And it went from things like saying, that wasn't me talking, I was quoting the guy from PIMCO, which is true, but he was clearly endorsing what the guy was saying, to then saying, I wasn't giving a policy recommendation, that was just a positive statement of economic analysis. So again, if Krugman was just saying this is the way to get recovery, he wasn't saying recovery would be good. Who in the world would think that Paul Krugman was for economic recovery, right? Assuming economic depression is bad, then this follows, but we're scientists. Okay, so there's that. And then the latest one is somebody asked him, I think it was at that Spanish thing when he debated the Spanish guy. Somebody from the crowd asked him, what about that, Krugman, back in 2002 when you said it would be good that he should replace the NASDAQ bubble with a housing bubble? And Krugman said, if you go and read me in context, I was clearly joking. So he just realized, you would think if he was joking, he would have mentioned that in the past 3 or 4 years. Like it's the first time it occurred to him to let us know, by the way, that was a joke. So, okay. Why don't I stop there and we got a few minutes for questions.